guys to the Utah-based Summit on Mental Health. This session is with Dr. Barrett Labrum, and he's going to be talking about ADD and ADHD. The topics and messages we are discussing today have the opportunity to change and possibly save lives. For many of us, these are not theories or stories of strangers. They are real-life situations we face with those close to us and us personally sometimes. This summit was designed to inspire and educate each of us, but more importantly to enable us to bless the lives of others. My name is Lauren, and I'm one of the board members and with Pause Wellness, and I'd like to take just a minute to describe our organization and our mission. Sorry, this microphone is really short for me. I'm really tall. So Pause was formed here in Cache Valley, and it's a nonprofit 501c3 that's entirely focused on improving lives by nurturing inner peace and preventing anxiety, depression, and harmful habits. We offer therapy for youth, teens, and adults, mental health training and instruction for businesses, medical care, missionary wellness center, youth wellness center, and we have 2 podcasts currently. Pause accepts a variety of insurances, and we also accept bishop's pay from the LDS Church. Please visit our website at pausewellness.org, and you can also follow us on social media for any ongoing information. You should have tons of QR codes in those folders that you have to scan and look at anything that we have going on. And now I'm going to introduce Dr. Labrum. So, Barrett Labrum is a community pediatrician who practices in Cache Valley. Dr. Labrum grew up in Orangeville, Utah, a small coal mining town in Emery County. He received his undergraduate degree at Utah State and his medical school training in Kirksville, Missouri at A.T. Still University. He completed specialty training in pediatrics from Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City in 2011 and joined Primary Care Pediatrics here in North Logan. His practice focuses on general pediatric problems, including mental health. Dr. Labrum has been married to Chantel for 23 years. Chantel. Whatever, I never know. For 23 years. They have 6 children and are busy being parents. Dr. Labrum enjoys golf in his spare time as well as being outdoors with his family. All right, it's all yours.
Perfect. I'm going to try and talk really loud, because I'm pretty loud if anyone knows me. So I kind of, the plan is to kind of walk around a little bit. This is supposed to be a little bit of a discussion. I don't think anyone came here to just sit and listen to me, right, Jimmy? I'm going to, let me go to the first slide here. Oops, make sure I'm moving this right direction. There we go. All right. Thanks for the introduction. I am a community pediatrician, which means I am not an expert in ADD. Okay, I'm going to throw that out there right now. I do have a lot of experience, and I'm going to go through this lecture more in a trying not to just be completely clinical, but the idea is that we get a better idea about what ADD is, how do we diagnose it, what can we do as people that help children that help with this condition. Here's your learning goals: definition and the diagnosis of ADD. So we'll go a little bit through what makes it a person get diagnosed with ADD. What is the definition of ADD? In fact, someone said, one of my kids this morning was like, what's the difference between ADD and ADHD, right? Like those are the kind of things that we're going to talk about today. A little bit about the clinical picture. What do we see? Like what do you see as a person with ADD and what does that mean clinically? And then we'll go a little bit through the treatment considerations and how we deal with this issue. Again, if you guys have questions, please raise your hand, shout anything out, and we'll try and have a little bit of a discussion about this. So good, Aubrey's here. No, that's the ADD expert right there. Okay. All right, ADD at a glance. Okay, so 10% of children have a current diagnosis of ADD. That's 6.5 million kids, okay? So think about our teachers here in the valley, in their classroom. 1 out of every 10 kids has ADD. That means about every classroom is going to have about three or 4 students with ADD. And so it can be a challenge, and we have to consider that. Now, the second statistic say 30% is the number of children who have never received the diagnosis or had any treatment with it, okay? So it's probably more, okay? 3 might have been diagnosed with ADD, but then add in another couple that haven't been diagnosed with it, or maybe they're kind of borderline. And so our teachers and our community leaders and our church folks are dealing with, you know, a pretty good chunk of kids that have ADD, okay? I think this last statistic is really important. 70, almost 80% of children that are diagnosed with ADD have some other co-occurring diagnosis with it, okay? And we see that clinically a lot. You know, a kid has ADD, but they might also be dealing with anxiety, depression. They might be dealing with OCD. They might be dealing with other things that are going to be part of the challenge that they have. Okay, so big question, don't we all have ADD? We've all been there, right? You can't pay attention, sitting here in this lecture, listening to me, half of your, you know, going off into space and not really paying attention, right? And that's true. I think we all have at least a portion of us at certain times in our life where we're not paying attention, or we aren't, you know, getting things done on the list that we're supposed to get done, or whatever. And that's true. I think that's part of human nature. It becomes an issue when it really affects how you're able to function. And that's the difference between ADD and ADHD versus, you know, someone that's just living their life and maybe it's a little bit spacey, okay? And so we'll talk about that. The diagnostic criteria for ADHD, there's specific criteria to make a diagnosis. It comes from the DSM-4 manual, which is the manual that we use in mental health to make diagnoses of different conditions. And then we're going to talk a little bit about making a diagnosis of ADD, okay? So in order to make a diagnosis, well, let's go through this, okay? How come there's no blood tests for ADD? That makes it easy, right? When you have, you know, high lipids or something, you can just get a blood test. Why can't we just do that with ADD? And that's what's the challenge with a lot of our mental health conditions, is they're really not that easy to diagnose a lot of times, okay? So when we talk about ADD, let's see what my next slide is. Okay. When we talk about ADD, some really important things that we have to remember, at least in the clinical aspect, is ADD is the way your brain is wired, okay? It is the way that you think about life and how you go through life. And it doesn't matter if you're a parent. Let's see if this, oh, there we go. It doesn't matter if you're a parent, your kid acts the same way, okay? As it does in school or even at the doctor's office. Okay? It doesn't matter where you're at, you're just wired that way, okay? So when you make a diagnosis, when we're looking at whether a child has ADHD or ADD or not, one of the really important diagnostic criteria is that it happens in more than one place. You can't just have a kid that doesn't listen to you at home and doesn't do their chores and, you know, is crazy or whatever, but at school they're a perfect angel, okay? That is not ADHD, okay, by definition. Okay, remember when we're doing a diagnosis, we're thinking about other things as well as ADHD. How were they when they were a young child? You know, when you get those kids and they're like, they've been crazy since they were 2 years old. I couldn't get them stuck, right? How is their social interaction? Do they get along with friends? Do they struggle with those kinds of things? Those are important to note. What kind of, are they really impulsive? Do they have a lot of anxiety? Do they cry a lot? Do they, you know, all those things are important when we're doing an evaluation. School evaluations is the same thing. Do they have learning disorders? What if it's not necessarily, they're not paying attention, but maybe it's not because they have ADD, maybe they just don't understand, or maybe they have a communication disorder or something like that. When we talk about ADD and people come in the clinic, we're always thinking about, hey, what about hearing? Are they hearing? Do they need their eyes checked? is this anxiety and depression. A lot of times we see anxiety and depression, and we'll talk about that a little later, but anxiety and ADHD, a lot of the symptoms just really overlap, and so it's really hard sometimes to tease those things out, okay? Maybe they have a thyroid problem, maybe that's why they're not paying attention. Are they developmentally normal for their age? Maybe they are just developmental delayed, and that's what happens. Yes?
What do you mean if there's a thyroid problem?
Well, so thyroid can, if you have hyperthyroid, it can really get you to speed up, and you might be a little agitated. You may have issues regarding paying attention because of that, okay? A hyperthyroid kid could really look like the guy, they have ADD, right? Okay?
So do they test the blood for the thyroid problems?
They do, a lot of times we do, yes. When we're like trying to rule out whether there might be something else going on, then yes, that is one of the tests that we do. Now, hyperthyroid in a kid is really rare. It's not very common. Way more common in adults than in kids, but it is something that we do. We do check thyroid occasionally, especially when we're talking about mental health issues. Thyroid is one of those things we always check. Okay, good question. Any questions about any of these? That's great. Okay, so let's talk about making a diagnosis, okay? So there's two things you often hear about this ADD versus ADHD, what's the difference? And there's really not a difference. It's more of a classification. Are your symptoms more inattention or are they more hyperactive? That's essentially what it means, okay? Here are, in order to make a diagnosis of ADD, you have to have 6 of the symptoms of inattention or hyperactivity up to age 16 and have symptoms that last longer than 6 months. And this is the key, be inappropriate for the age level. I don't know if you've ever been around 12-year-old boys, but not very attentive, no matter what they are, okay? So it has to be abnormal, okay? All right, so look at a few of those things: inattention, forgetfulness, doesn't seem to be listening, doesn't follow through, losing things, I can't keep track of my homework, I can't get it in my bag. Those are inattentive. Hyperactive or like fidget, can't sit still, talking a lot, blurting out answers, running around inappropriately, those kinds of things, okay? And so, in my opinion and my clinical things, these kids right here, they're easy to pick up, right? They're the kids that are in our office when they're kindergartners saying, a kid cannot sit still, okay? And they're crazy. So these are easy, okay? These, they're a little harder, okay? These are oftentimes girls, and they're oftentimes a little later when they're picked up, because they're not driving you nuts most of the time, okay? Okay? Okay. Any questions? Yeah.
What if they're both?
And there is mixed. You can be both, and you can it's either one. Okay. They're not gonna all. I don't know if you knew this, but humans don't fit in boxes very well. Okay. So they can be both. Okay. Right. Yeah.
Can you kind of evolve out of them if you didn't get the medication you do in your something like that? Is there things that?
Yeah. So one of the things we'll talk to is treatment options, but one of the things that's kind of key about ADD when we talk about treatment is learning how to teach kids to learn how to function. Okay, so ADD likely does not go away. Okay, I think that people that have ADD when they're young are dealing with it as they get older. But can they mature and figure out ways to keep their lists going or whatever, right? Not fidget as much or control their impulsivity? Yes, they can. And puberty goes a long ways to helping a lot of those things. And so yes, they can get better. Now, in the psychology world, there's a lot of there's this adult onset ADD symptoms or this adult onset diagnosis, and a lot of psychologists don't really believe you can get ADD when you're an adult. You probably had it when you were a kid, you just weren't diagnosed, right? And so that's kind of the rule with ADD, is that it's not like you get it as you get older, you just had it, you just never feel it, okay? Yeah.
I'm just curious if they're seeing an overlap with like MTHFR gene mutation that can impact your ability to absorb key nutrients that affect your focus?
Yeah, so MTHFR gene is one of those kind of like I wouldn't say it's controversial necessarily, but there was a good hope initially when it came out that it would give us a lot of information about certain things, specifically mental health type stuff. As it's played out over the years, at least in the medical literature, it hasn't really played out that well as a really good help, if that makes sense, okay? And so we'll talk about that a little bit later, but is folate and adding folate to your diet and things like that going to hurt? No, and it may be a little bit helpful, but as far as like whether that, and part of that is just because as they test more and more people for the gene, we found that it's really pretty common, right?
Yeah, like 40% of North America.
Yeah, it's like 50% of people. So it's like, well, 50% of people have this gene. Is this really the, you know, Pandora's box or whatever that we thought it would be to help people with their mental health and or other things? It's not just mental health, there's other things associated with it. But is it going to be hurtful? No, I think doing those kinds of things isn't going to hurt. We'll talk about that in a little while. Okay, what else? Any other questions? Okay. Here's your boring DSM-5 criteria. Several symptoms before the age of 12. So again, we're kind of talking about that. It doesn't really start later, it starts early. And the 2 or more settings is a must in the diagnosis, okay? And it must be clearly affecting their life. Symptoms are not better explained by some other diagnosis, like we already talked about. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about how to make the diagnosis? Now, typically in my office, we have some questionnaires, right? That you send home, the parents fill out a questionnaire, they take it to their teacher, typically, the teacher will fill it out. They send it back into our office, we make a diagnosis based on the results of the paperwork, as well as the clinical picture that we're having while we're in clinic and talking to the parents and things like that. That's how we make the diagnosis. I think the key things that I look for, or does this happen more in 2 or more settings? Because oftentimes people come in and like, I can't get my kid to listen. They don't listen at all while they're at house. And then I'm like, how are they at school? Oh, they're perfect angels. Like they're fine. The teacher said they listen. And I'm like, you know, hey, I'm sorry to tell you, but it's not ADD. This kid is, it's a parenting thing, okay? Like they're walking all over you, and we need to do something about it, okay? And so that's what, and it helps us focus where it's going to be the most helpful for the child, okay? And then the other part is this: it's got to affect their life, okay? And if it's not, and a lot of times it's affecting their life significantly. By the time they come to me, it's a problem, right? Okay. So my kid has a lot of energy. What's the big deal, right? And it's true. A lot of kids have a lot of energy. This is my family. We have 6 of us. Molly's over there. Wave, Molly. Okay. There's Molly right there. We have 3 adopted kids, 3 biological kids. You know, interestingly, when we first decided to adopt, you know, people probably have a lot of opinions about adoption, and we love adoption. But we didn't know what we were getting into, I'll tell you that, okay? Because when we talk about adoption and all of the things associated with it, there can be some challenges. And we have 3 of our kids have ADD. And so we've dealt with I've learned a lot about ADD just from watching my own kids. And so, so we know the challenges that it sometimes brings to families. Right, Molly? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Okay, so yeah, my kid's super busy, doesn't want to listen in school. Does it really matter? Okay, that's the question. Does it matter? We know that people with, these are the risks from not treating ADHD. Social, impulse control, missing social cues, difficulty making friends. Okay, this is huge. When you've got kids that are, you know, in middle school and they don't really have any friends because they bug everyone, okay, it's an issue and it's hard. The school, obviously poor school performance, they end up not loving school. They don't want to go to school because they hate it, they get in trouble all the time. That's a problem. Behavior problems at school, sometimes they'll act out just because they don't want to be there. It's hard, they have a lot of impulse. It's really hard when you're in 1st grade to sit on the mat and listen in school when you have ADD. It just really is, okay? Which then leads to that poor self-esteem, right? So all these things, then they're getting in trouble all the time, and then they think they're a bad kid, and they feel bad about themselves, and they don't want to be that way, and it just keeps rolling, okay? What about injury? Impulse control can lead to risky behaviors. You know, the kids with ADD, they'll be the ones that end up using alcohol, smoking, doing drugs, because that makes them feel better, okay? And that is one of the big things that we don't like, okay? One thing that you don't even think about with injury, and I've had a few people, even in the last year, that driving a car as a 16-year-old with ADD is extremely dangerous, okay? And so people get in car accidents just because they aren't paying attention. I don't know if you do that, okay? And having ADD and driving a car is a bad setup, okay? So not treating ADD in your 16-year-old is a risk, okay? Depression, obviously the poor self-esteem can lead to depression, really bad in teenagers, suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideation. So all these things that we've talked about with mental health can stem from underlying ADD and ADHD as well. We talked about substance abuse. Okay. Treatments. Okay, does anyone have any questions about why we do this? Why are we doing this? Okay. Okay. First line treatment, meds. Okay, so without fail, I mean, I see this all the time, at least once a week. Kid has ADD, parents come in, and the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, I don't want to do meds. And I totally get it, okay? Because I don't think there's one person in here that wants to give meds to their kids. No one wants to, okay? So why are we saying the first line treatment is meds when you're above 6 years old? And the reason why is because they work really, really, really well, and they work really fast. And we'll talk a little bit about that.
I just want to add my 2 cents on that.
Yeah.
I have a couple kids who, I was the same way. I didn't want to put them on meds.
Yeah.
But when we found the right medicine, it was a godsend.
Yeah.
Because what it does is it gets your kid to the baseline of normality, and then you can work on behavior and lifestyle.
Amen. Okay, just what he said. I don't have to give the letter. Okay. So yes, okay, and I get it, and I'm not here to push meds, and I always give the parents choices, but I want people to understand that it's not necessarily the worst thing that you can do for your children. Okay, if they need it for this stuff, just like you said. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, I think what he said makes sense because my wife works with kids that are behind, and a lot of times the teacher is overwhelmed. She's got a class full of kids and 3 of them are running all the time. And the principal has the doctor on call that'll write you the script, and so they give the kids the medicine and they're comatose in school, so it's not a problem anymore, and they don't take the opportunity to work on their behavior while they're controllable.
For sure, okay, and there is wrong ways to do medicines, okay? That it isn't supposed to be the, let's get them comatose so they can't really move anymore, okay? So there is wrong ways to do medications as well, which we'll talk about, okay? And I'm gonna go through a few meds, yes.
Does the literature show at all that there's an increased risk of addiction in using these types of medicines, especially the rapid release amphetamines when they're started as children?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that the literature does show that it actually reduces the risk of sort of drug-seeking behaviors. So essentially, when you're treating the ADHD, they do less drugs. Even if it's the short-acting stuff. No one really loves the short-acting stuff because of the abuse potential, and no one wants to be taking meds 3 or 4 times a day anyway, okay? So, but yeah, you actually reduce the risk of having okay? So this is the treatment strategy, and they're all weighted the same. Medication, behavior, lifestyle, okay? Whenever you do a treatment plan, it should include all of those things, okay? You know, kind of, we'll talk a little bit about this. The behavior is, it's really important to understand, especially with the behavior management, the classic therapy, a cognitive behavior therapy for ADHD kids, especially if they're under 12, doesn't work well. In fact, it may not work at all, okay? Is that right? Aubrey, you're shaking, right? Okay. So, and there's a reason why, because Molly might go, Molly, I'm going to use you as an example, okay? Molly might go to our therapist and say, hey, like, I know I need to do better. And the therapist was like, okay, Molly, I want you to do this and this, and when you get really upset, let's do the butterfly pat, or let's do these things, and let's think about it, and let's think about ways to do it. And Molly's like, yeah, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna be so good this week. And then they walk out the door, and she has ADD, so guess what happens? She forgets. It's not there anymore, okay? And so that's really difficult to do really good cognitive behavior therapy for little kids that have ADD. What does work? You gotta teach the parents what they're supposed to do. So family therapy and family behavior therapy is what helps with ADD. These kids need really good structure at home to really succeed, and so that's where the therapy needs to be focused, okay? The third thing is lifestyle. I don't know if you knew this, but kids with ADD do not sleep. I don't know if anyone has kids with ADD, man, it is impossible to get them to sleep, okay? Also, they don't eat very well. They don't do any of these things that, I mean, they do exercise because they run around all the time, but they just don't, the lifestyle stuff is not good, okay? And so really concentrating, especially on the sleep, can be very helpful, okay? Yeah?
What do you do if, okay, I have several ADHD people in the family. I got them through to adulthood.
Good.
We didn't have to medicate them.
Yeah.
We got them through, very structured, Now they're adults and they're struggling. What do we do now? How do we help?
Yeah, I think, do they know have they talked to them about their ADD and all that kind of stuff?
Some of them use it as an excuse for everything.
Right, and that's one of the things. But I think, an adult world is not my place. But having a good conversation with them about medication, if they still need it, is important, okay? Even though they may, again, we're talking about this adult onset ADD stuff. It's like, you know what, you made it through childhood, but adulthood's a step up too, right? We can help you get through, high school. College is a different level, okay? You've got to be able to do that yourself. And sometimes they're just not able to, and being really real about, hey, you know what, we might have to revisit that medication thing again, or revisit the behavior. Now, cognitive behavior therapy for adults with ADD works a lot better, okay? And so counseling is another option too. Lifestyle in adults is hard. My wife, man, she's up all night long, and I'm like, dude, you gotta sleep, you know what I mean? And so really concentrating on those things for everyone can be really helpful. I hope that answers your question. Okay, let's talk a little bit about medications. We got like 15 minutes, I think. 15? What do we have?
Let's see.
Sorry.
Timer lady.
Timer.
21.
20, okay. All right, so there's two giant classes of medication that we use, the methylphenidate class and the amphetamine class. I don't want to get into the whole chemistry part of it, no one wants to hear that. But essentially, the thing I want to point out is look at all these medications that we have for the methylphenidates. Concerta, Ritalin, Polident, Vocalin, Metadata. All of these are different. They're all the same class of medication, but they all have a little bit of differences, okay? And then the amphetamines are these guys, okay? This is first line stuff, Adderall, you've all heard of, Vyvanse, Dexedrine, Zenzetti. All of these are the other class of medications. So my point is, and I tell this to my patients all the time, because someone said earlier about hey, like my kid's a zombie on this stuff. You know what, I got 31 flavors, okay? We can find something that's gonna work for you. We just might have to mess around a little bit to figure it out, okay? All right, any questions about these? Okay, everyone's bored about meds, okay. There's a couple of other ones. These are usually second line medication, add-on therapy, yeah.
Do you find in most situations that the medication is that they stay on the medication throughout, like adolescence and teenage, and like duration, or what's been your experience in terms of that?
That's a great question, because it's really variable. I will tell you that most kids that are on it when they're younger, at least in my experience, as they get through puberty, oftentimes there's a good change in it. Either they come way down on the dose, or they sometimes can go completely off of it, depending on the situation. A lot of kids are not on very much while they're in elementary school and middle school, and then as they get into high school, after puberty, they're able to handle it all together. And then I've got these other kids that are like, man, if you don't take your meds, like, it's like you're not functional. And so to me, it's probably about 60-40, meaning 60%, maybe 50 to 60% stay on the meds, and about 40% will eventually get off. Okay, that's how my experience is. I don't know, Aubrey, you've got a lot of experience. About the same. She's not answering me. She's like, I'm done. Okay, norepinephrine reuptake. Okay, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
What about the kids under, it says 6 and over?
Yeah.
What about kids under 6?
Yeah, so technically by the criteria of the DSM manual, you cannot make a diagnosis of ADD before the age of 5, okay? And really the medications are not indicated for kids under the age of 6, at least the FDA says that. Now, do we use it in kids that are a little bit younger? I never use it on anyone that's not in school. If they're not in school, then we don't use it, okay? But, and I use the medication in my practice for school, essentially. Okay, like if you can't sit in school, then you probably need something to help you out, okay? And I even tell parents, like, I actually don't care what they're like at home. I mean, good luck, okay? But I do care what they are in school, okay? So, so that's what we really focus our stuff on, okay?
Question.
Yeah.
So I have 2 kiddos on it. One doesn't want to have ADD. It makes them embarrassed to eat food with you.
Yeah, for sure.
And I have a son who loves that about himself.
Yeah.
And you know, he's like, it makes me fun and funny.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm, you know, everyone loves me and I love everyone. And it's really difficult to get him to take his medicine because he's like, I feel like I'm taking away the very best part of me.
Right.
And so, how do you force them to take a medicine when they feel like they're losing? I mean, and it's not making him a zombie or boring, but he feels like it's just taking the best part of him away.
Yeah.
And so how do you,
That's a challenge.
Suggest as far as getting them to take the medicine?
You know, that's a challenge, and I don't have a good answer for that, honestly. Until the kid decides for themselves that it's needed, you're kind of in a stuck position because they have to buy in at some point. Okay, now if you're in 2nd grade or 3rd grade, it's probably a little easier to get them to take their meds. But once they get into middle school and high school, it's really difficult if they don't want to take them. And so either, you know, is his grades good and like those kinds of things. And honestly, if his grades, I don't know, I said his, I didn't.
Yeah, it is a boy. I think I said he.
So if his grades are good and he seems to be doing okay, then you have to weigh that, whether that's worth for him to take or not. Now, if his grades are not good, and like, hey, you actually can't function without your meds, then you gotta figure out how to get your body into it. Now, with that said, you can also always lower the dose and lower the dose and lower the dose to the point where he still has that ability, and maybe it's just enough to get him so he can listen to English class, right? That's the point, okay? These are norepinephrine. Any other questions? Sorry. Okay, second line drugs. This is Strattera, Quellbree. They're used second line typically. And some kids can't tolerate, you know, stimulants and things like that. This one I don't feel like works great. This one clinically works relatively okay. These over here, these are clonidine and guanfacine. We use Intunev quite a bit as an add-on therapy if a kid is really, just the impulsivity stuff is really bad. That's a really good one to add on. Clonidine, I feel like makes you too tired, so we don't use that a ton either. So, okay. We use it a ton for sleep, okay, not as a daily medication for that, okay. What's the advantages of using medication? They work really, really well. That's the first thing, okay. And like you said earlier, can be life-changing, right? Life-changing, and you have to remember that. There's a lot of options, and we talked about that a little bit. They work really fast, so they're easy to titrate. When I first start a kid on a med, I'll get them maybe 10 or 15 days worth of medication, and I'll tell them hey, call me in 10 days, you'll know whether it's working or not. That's how fast they work. Whereas when you're using medications for depression, anxiety, it's call me back in a couple months, we'll see how you're feeling, okay? So this is one advantage of this. And there's a lot of long-term studies about their safety and efficacy. These things have been, we all know, they've been around since the 80s, okay? And so there's a lot of good information about how safe they are, and that's the bottom line, okay? Disadvantages. They work too fast sometimes, okay? They don't last all day, and sometimes they can get them through school, and then come homework time, it's an issue, okay? And so we have to remember, especially if we're in a church situation or something like that, and it's young men's at night, you know what, your kids with ADD might be a little bit rough because it's wore off by that time, okay? Sleep issues are an issue or a problem with ADD, and whether it's the meds or the ADD itself, that's a good question mark. It's probably both, but that's something we have to worry about. One of the big things with the medications is they make it so you don't feel hungry, okay? And so, you know, to have a kid at school and they don't eat lunch and they haven't eaten really any breakfast, maybe they just ran out the door, and by the afternoon, man, they get a little hangry, okay? And so making sure that they get a little bit of a snack or something during the day, especially if they're your own children, make sure they have that around. But that's a big problem, and it can affect their growth. And so as a pediatrician, we're always checking that up to make sure that they're still growing. The other part of it is, as we all know, these are controlled substances. It makes it so that we have to be very, very watchful when we prescribe them. They have to be, you have to be careful with them in your home. If people know that, you've got Adderall sitting in your house all over the place, you might have a robber come in and take it. So those are things you have to be just mindful of, okay? Any questions about disadvantages? Yeah?
The appetite one.
Yeah.
My grandson is 11.
Mm-hmm.
He struggles with that when he's tiny.
Yeah.
And it scares me.
Mm-hmm.
But his dad makes him.
Yeah.
He'll actually get his plate.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that he's eating at school.
Yeah, and
How do you?
honestly, I just tell people, you know what, they're not going to eat at school. They're just not. There's not a dang thing you can do for that. I encourage them to take some fruit snacks and, just get a little something, but they're not going to eat at school. The thing you have to do is make sure that you understand that they're going to eat at night, okay? And the problem, I'm like old school dad a lot of times, and the kid eats dinner, and I'm like, you didn't eat your dinner, you're done, okay? We're not having anything else. You already had your chance. Okay. Yeah, you already had your chance. It's 6 o'clock. We already done with dinner. You're not having anything else, right? And then Molly over there. Hi, Molly. Okay. Molly over there will wake up. Well, it'll be 9 o'clock, and she's ready to go to bed. Some of it's behavior, I'm sure, but it's 9 o'clock, and she's like, I'm hungry. And you know what? She'll down like 6 corn dogs at nighttime. Okay.
Because I wasn't hungry.
Yeah, she was really hungry, okay? But, so as a parent, you have to just recognize that, you know what? They're going to do that. You just got to let it go. Yeah, tell them. Yeah.
I would sneak in every single night after my friend went to bed and have like 3 bowls of cereal.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And they knew it. They just never disciplined it.
Yeah, I think it's just, you just have to have expectations that, you know what? It's okay. They can have 6 corn dogs at 9 o'clock at night. It's just the way it is. Okay. All right, cool. Anything else about that? Good question. Alternative treatments. Okay, there are tons of alternative treatments. I don't know if you guys can see this slide, but a couple of things. Alternative treatments are difficult because sometimes people feel like they work, sometimes they don't. There are things that you just want to be careful with, okay? So I put the snake oil thing here just so that these are red flags to just keep in mind when the claim the treatment will work for everyone. That's a red flag, okay? Because there's not a treatment that works for everyone, okay? No matter what. When the proof is that only a few people say that it works, it should be scheduled, research, studied, those kind of things. When a treatment does not have directions or the contents are not listed, okay? That's always a red flag. Like you should probably know what you're ingesting or whatever. When you don't get information about side effects, when they say there's no side effects, okay? Everything has side effects, okay? When you don't get, when you are not told the word natural, I don't know what that is. When you are not told the word natural doesn't always mean it's safe, okay? There are a lot of natural things, okay? Marijuana is natural. I don't know if you've heard that before, okay? There are side effects to that, okay, that people don't really understand, okay? It's not always just what makes you feel better. Well, it can also make you throw up every single day too, so that's okay? When it is a secret formula, miraculous, amazing breakthrough, there's no secret formula. It doesn't exist, okay? When you learn about it on an infomercial or a book author is selling it, okay, we get this one a lot. Blah, blah, blah wrote this book about it and it works for everyone and it's not, and it's maybe not there. Anyway, those are some red flags, okay? Behavior therapy, let's talk a little bit of that. We got 10 minutes, so. ADD education, I think everyone should know about their condition, okay? So when we talk about ADD, make sure that everyone, including the child, knows about it. I know so many parents that are like, I don't want my kid to know he's got ADD. Don't tell him, okay? Like, that's a bad idea, okay? We want to give people an idea. Now, granted, there are some people that say, oh, I got ADD, I don't have to do that. Okay, well, that's a behavior thing that you have to fix, but they should still know they have ADD. Behavior therapy, learn the skills to help their control their emotions and their behavior. That's that behavior therapy that we talked about. Counseling for family relationships, self-esteem, parenting, okay? I think parenting stuff is extremely important when you're talking about ADD. You guys have to learn how to manage it in your family, okay? Parent training, again. And then the last piece that I'm going to throw in there is the 504 plan. Does everyone know what a 504 plan is? Okay? Yeah, all right. This kid to tell us about it. Anyway, it's a plan that you can get from the school, that you make with the school to help your kids have accommodations for their disability, essentially. Okay, a 504 plan can be for your speech. It could be for, say your kid has a hearing deficit, they can make sure that they have speakers in the classroom so they can hear. Well, if your kid has ADD, that's a thing that can get you a 504. It's a medical diagnosis where you can get some accommodations. Every kid that has a diagnosis of ADD really should have a 504 plan.
Can I just like interject on that from the school side?
Uh-oh.
Like,
Okay.
just saying that like there's a process that you go through that's
It's big,
legal
small.
paperwork.
Yeah.
And so it's not just a yes for everybody.
Yeah.
Like it has to be negatively impacted.
Right, that's true. Okay, so if you're having a hard time in school, if they're not getting a lot of help from school, if there's a lot of things that you can do for accommodations, if that's something that needs to be talked about, okay? The schools, and I'm coming from the school side, from the medical side, the schools have to go through a lot of paperwork to get this stuff done, and it's kind of a pain, okay? And most schools, honestly, in Cache Valley especially, do a really good job of just making the accommodations without having a formalized plan, okay? And that is totally appropriate, okay? I think that if you're having a hard time getting the accommodations, then consider having a 504 plan, okay? Is that better? Is that a better way to say that?
Yes, it's just different for every child.
For sure.
So I think you just have to know there's a process that you go through.
With ADD especially, you know, you got these kids that are very mild, okay? And then you got really kids that are like way severe. And so it's just like everything else, okay? Does that make sense? And that's true. It should say every person needs to do that. Okay. Lifestyle. This is huge, okay? Oh, now we're down to 5 minutes. And I gotta start talking faster. I'll let you guys see this. Do you guys have any questions about any lifestyle stuff? I think sleep is probably the biggest, most important thing in this. Sleep and the diet, okay?
I'm curious about sleep aids if needed.
Yeah, so some kids cannot sleep, okay? And if we need to use, sometimes we'll use melatonin, especially melatonin. People use melatonin all the time. It's been shown to be safe, okay, in kids to help with their sleep. We do use things like clonidine or trazodone, which are sleep aids, to help kids go to sleep if they need to, okay? So that is something that we will oftentimes do. This right here, kids with ADD will spend hours and hours and hours on electronic devices, okay? Isn't that weird that they won't listen to math, but they can concentrate on their media all day long, okay? It's just how it is, okay? All right, any questions about this? Sorry, we're running out of time. Okay, hey, we're actually done. That's good, okay. The last thing I just want to put up here, God's children deserve God's love, okay? That means that as adults, it's our responsibility to learn what we can do for our behavior to help them with their behavior. I think that's really important, okay? It's really important that every kid, me and Molly were talking about this earlier, she said, even the murderers, and I said, even the murderers deserve love, okay? And even when you feel like you're going to murder your child, which you're not going to do, okay? But they still deserve our love, okay? All right, here's some information. I like this website. I mean, it's great. I use it for a lot of things with ADD, okay? It's great. Chad.org. Really evidence-based stuff, okay? Whoops. Okay, there's my information.
I have a question.
All right, questions? Yeah.
Chat.org.
Yeah,
So also as an educator.
yeah.
As well as a principal.
Uh-oh. Okay.
When we have, so we have the experience of teaching classrooms of children and having conferences and information sharing with us that medications are often the first line, best first choice. Definitely something that should be considered. Do you feel like that chat, because I was going to say, is there a go-to that we could say, hey, go here, explore, investigate as a parent, see if it's something that might help be an answer for your child's struggle?
The answer is yes. Send them there.
So this is a good,
This is good,
Go there.
evidence-based, has some good information, has a whole part about parents, has a lot of stuff about, they have behavior plans in there that you can look at home. There's a whole bunch of stuff like that, as well as medications and like, you know, how to, it's really good evidence-based, like really good, that's a good one to send parents to.
user-friendly.
User-friendly, all those things, yeah. I think it's got stuff for educators on there too, so. Questions? Does anyone have, Steph?
I have a comment.
Yes.
As an adult with ADHD, I think that as healthcare professionals, it is really important that we start normalizing mental health diagnoses, especially ADHD. I personally think that ADHD brains are beautiful, and some of the most brilliant minds in history were a little bit neurodivergent. And that's what I tell every person that I diagnose. There is nothing wrong with you. You have a beautiful brain, Molly. A beautiful brain, right? You can't come up with those crazy things if your brain isn't thinking about all these different things.
Sure.
And with that, if we make it more normalized and not a problem, then giving a child medication, when you say it's life-changing, it is. And by withholding that medication, you really can cause significant harm, in my opinion, to your child, who then is going to also be an adult suffering longer than they need to. And so I just hear like a lot of, it just feels like ADHD is bad, and it's not, and mental is bad. And I think that we're responsible for normalizing that. For sure, and if it came across that way, I apologize, right? But No, not you.
Right. So yeah, I mean, this is, it's human. It's just human, right? Like everyone is human, and every human should be different. Unfortunately, if the human is different enough that they get outcast, that's not what we want. Okay, medication will help the child be able to learn those skills and be able to, you know, become social, reduce their risk of risky behaviors in the future, those kinds of things. And that's what we're trying to do. And going back to this, it's our responsibility as an adult to learn what we can do in our behavior to help them with their behavior. And that's really important. Okay, we have 30 seconds. Does anyone have anything they would like to add? Yeah.
Hi, my name's Chad. That's
Hi, Chad.
on my website.
Oh, dang.
Summer recreation director. We deal with a lot of coaches that also do stuff with church. I feel like the schools do a good job for accommodating and working with kids that have ADD. How do we empower others? Because I feel like a lot of times the parents will deny us not just another river in Egypt. They just won't tell us, and we can't help them if we don't know. How do we encourage parents to disclose and then also empower others to help?
Yeah, that's a great question.
20 seconds.
Yeah, good answer. You know, thinking of my own stuff, I don't think I've ever talked on you know, any of my kids when they sign up for sports or whatever. I don't know if there's ever even a spot to say like, hey, my kid has ADD or something like that. So, you know, maybe adding it into the sign-up sheet where you say, hey, does your kid have any cool things that we need to know about, like autism or ADD? You know, we'd like to really accommodate that. Put it right there, just like that, you know? And so that way, I would be more inclined to say, yeah, my kid's got ADD, if you're like, we really want to help them as much as we possibly can, so let us know so we can help them. That would be a good way to kind of bring that up. You know, what can you do for your coaches? I think most coaches probably, I don't know, Spencer, you might be able to say more about this, but most coaches will pick up at some point. But I think really giving them expectations about, you know, the fourth grader and what they're able to do and, you know, flag football is going to be one of the better things to do for the coaching. There's really good apps and stuff that really get kids running around and doing all kinds of things, which is awesome for ADD, right? Like, let them do their thing. So, anyway, I hope that answers a little bit of your question. But yeah, I think adding that onto the list, you know, when you're signing things up, who's your friend you want to be with, and is there any cool things about your kid that we need to know? Okay? All right. Okay.